Hello, everybody. Welcome to Baby Driver. Hello, Brooklyn. Hello, Austin. Hello, everybody else who's out there watching on the live stream. Anybody who's sitting at home watching on Facebook Live, welcome. I don't know how many of you there are at this point. You guys, you were in for such a treat tonight. I got a chance to see this movie a little while ago. This is so much fun. And let me tell you, you were in the perfect place to see it in the Alamo Drafthouse. Right here in Brooklyn, we've got glasses. I hope you guys have your glasses too. This movie is going to be fast. It's going to be loud. You are going to love it. If you've never been to an Alamo before, a few quick things before we get started. Please, we have special guests here tonight, so we want to make sure that we respect them so we can come back, do a lot of this stuff more often. Please turn your phone off. Please don't talk or text. Take pictures of the screen, Snapchat. I know it sounds dumb, but people do it. They actually tag us in it, which is maybe the dumbest thing in the world. If you don't want to get kicked out, please don't do that. And if you see anybody who is doing that, just raise one of your little order cards and a server will come over and they will handle that for you. Please tip your servers tonight. They're working really hard to make sure you have everything you need, and I hope you have everything you need. Cold beer, water, pizza, whatever you need. What else? Stick around after the movie. We have a special guest who's going to be sitting right here answering all of your questions. If you have any questions, that's right, Mr. Edgar Wright. If you have any questions for Mr. Wright, not now. When the movie's over, hashtag #AskAlamo. We will be going through those questions during the Q&A and asking some of your questions here, your questions out there, so you get a chance to get your voice heard. I don't think there's anything else. I'm going to get out of your way so you guys can enjoy this movie. It's amazing. Have fun. I'm going to see you guys in about 2 hours, and we're going to have even more fun right here. Thank you all so much. See you soon. How about that movie? Yes! Oh my God, that was so good. So good. Thank you all again so much for coming. I took Edgar's microphone. There you go. We have a very special guest here tonight. He came all the way from London, UK, to be here. And when I say he came all the way from London, I'm literally not exaggerating. He got off the plane at JFK and drove here. He may be a little tired because before that he was in Madrid, all over the world, but he is here tonight in Brooklyn to talk to you guys here and talk to all of you at Alamo Drafthouse theaters across the world and on Facebook Live. I can't see up there. Mr. Edgar Wright? There he is. Yes. There he is. Good to see you.
Hello, hello.
How you feeling?
I feel okay.
Yeah? Need some caffeine, or are you good?
I'll take a coffee if someone's offering.
Can somebody get Edgar a coffee, please? That would be great. So
You all look very blue, the lighting on you guys.
that is
Seems
interesting.
like that ultraviolet club light that shows up all the dandruff.
Black light. Let's open that. So one of the stories that I had heard in kind of reading about this movie is this is not something that you just started working on over the course of a year or so, that you have had this script and this idea sort of floating around for a good part of 20 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, at least the initial idea for it. But it was funny because it sort of came to me through listening to music. So it wasn't something where, so literally like 22 years ago, when I was first listening to the Jon Spencer Blues Explosion album, Orange, I listened to that track, Bell Bottoms, which is the first song in the movie. And, you know, I was in North London. I had just moved to London. I was living in like a house with some school friends and college friends. But I was just listening to it on audio cassette, a duped audio cassette. Apologies to Jon Spencer. I didn't actually buy it. I just kind of listened to that track and I started visualizing this car chase. And I sort of basically had just the scene as like, and it was just like listening to the song and the structure of the song made me sort of visualize the scene. And I guess that's something that I sort of carried on to sort of do a lot, you know, not just with this, but other things where you sort of hear a song and you have an idea for something. So it literally started very, very simply of like that song. It takes about 2.5 minutes to sort of like kick off. It's got a big build up. It's just like that thing. I don't know whether you do this with stuff where you hear something, a song, and you're thinking, oh, what a great intro. That'd be great like for like the start of a movie. And then I started imagining it, and it was literally, what is in the film is not a million miles away from what I imagined. But this was before it had a title or I knew what it was about or anything. But then I think it turned into the thing of just, I thought, well, what if the driver is actually playing the song? And then what if the driver is actually somebody that can't operate without the right soundtrack? And so it kept sort of developing over the years. And I also knew back then, even back when I was 21 in 1985, I knew that it wasn't a British film, because London is kind of car chase proofed. If you've been to London, if you've been in the traffic in London, you understand it's not easy to have a big old car chase in London, not anymore. So I knew it was an American film, so I knew it was like, I mean, it's funny, a journalist said to me the other day, said, so why did it take 22 years? And I was like, well, I wasn't really in the position when I was 21 to say, hey, TriStar, give me millions of dollars. So it's something that I've been thinking about in some form for that amount of time. And I even did 15 years ago, it's crazy, it's 15 years ago, I did this music video where I sort of did a dry run for the first scene. You saw a little clip of it in the movie, a video that I did with Noel Fielding from the Mighty Boosh called Blue Song. And you see about, you know, a tiny second of it. But it's basically been something I've been thinking about, sort of slow cooking for like a long time. I didn't officially start writing it or you know, like until about 10 years ago.
That Jon Spencer song, Bell Bottoms, is so perfect and it's so cinematic in its beat. Were you worried that in the intervening 20 years that somebody was going to kind of pull that out from under you?
Oh yeah, no, any of those songs, you're kind of worried that like Tarantino or James Gunn is going to beat you to somebody there first. So you're sort of silently waiting there and never mentioning any of the songs to anybody, just in case, you know, sort of like just, because there is always that thing, sort of, I had a funny conversation. I don't need the rest of it. That's cool. I got
Thank you.
I had this funny text conversation with James Gunn earlier this year. He was a friend of mine. And I said, I'm really worried that some of my Baby Driver songs are going to be on the Guardians 2 soundtrack. And so we had this text DM conversation. It was like playing poker. And he said, do you have any ELO? And I was like, no. I said, do you have any Queen? And he said, no. And he said, do you have any Sweet? And I was like, no. And he goes, do you have any Barry White? He goes, no. So we just went through all the artists without saying what the songs were, just to establish that we didn't have any of the same songs on the same soundtrack.
Did you find more often than not that the songs inspired the scenes, or some of the scenes inspired the musical choices?
It's a bit of both. Once I sort of had the idea from it, I would literally over this time just be earmarking tracks. Like, so when I started writing, or when I started kind of gathering together all the sort of research and stuff to start writing like 10 years ago, I already had earmarked like sort of Bell Bottoms, Hocus Pocus, the Tequila cover, the Barry White song, the Queen song. I think maybe about 8 or 9 of them. And so the first thing I did before I even started writing was I sort of tried to break down the songs, because sometimes, you know, the structure of the scenes would sort of be dictated by the song. So it'd be something like, the Focus one is a good example. Is like, I thought, oh, this would be great for like a foot chase scene. But then you sort of break down the structure of that, and it's like fast guitars, fast guitars, fast guitars, yodeling. Like fast guitars, accordion breakdown. And so I could literally like map out the scene based on the song. And I did that with Bell Bottoms, mostly action ones. And then when I wrote the other scenes in the movie, then it would go the other way around, where I knew what the scene was, but I would sort of sit there in front of my laptop and I wouldn't start writing until I'd found the right song. So I basically kind of just, always use the music as some kind of starting point.
How did writing this movie differ from your other scripts? Because this was the first film that you wrote all by yourself.
Discounting Fistful of Fingers.
Right.
First good film I wrote on my own. Yeah, it differed because obviously, like everything else that I've written has either been written with Simon Pegg or Michael Bacall or Joe Cornish, and it's a bit more of a lonely existence writing on your own. There's nobody to sort of ping off. But then also it wasn't really, it's not a comedy really. It's kind of, has funny bits in it, but it's more of a kind of heist movie. But it was tougher because I'd sort of find it a lot tougher to kind of just discipline myself and, just find, and most of my sort of procrastination sort of things were all like very sort of on point. It always that thing, sort of where you do kind of what I call kind of, very disciplined procrastination. So it's like I'm procrastinating from writing, but I am watching this 30s gangster film, which is sort of in the right
research.
Yeah. Research. Yeah. I do a lot of that. I do a lot of like watching like sort of old film noirs, reading the crime section in the paper. I mean, all stuff that actually does end up kind of filtering into it. The other big thing that I did, which was an enormous kind of help. I'm going to put this down. Sorry. The other thing I did that was a huge help and something that was amazing, and I haven't really had the opportunity since Hot Fuzz to do any research, because in Hot Fuzz we interviewed police officers. We couldn't interview any zombies for Shaun of the Dead. But for this, what I did, which was a great thing, was I interviewed ex-cons. So both in London and in Los Angeles, and also around the States, I got a researcher kind of found a bunch of people. Sometimes you find people through the rehabilitation process, and some kind of ex-cons have gone into writing. And so I interviewed like a bunch of like getaway drivers and ex-bank robbers. I have to say ex, not current bank robbers. And there's this one guy in particular called Joe Loya, L-O-Y-A, who wrote a book called The Man Who Outgrew the Prison Cell. And in the 80s and 90s, he committed 30 bank robberies. And he went to prison. I think he was in San Quentin for 10 years. And he's now out and he's now writing. He's actually writing on some TV shows now, actually. But he was somebody that I thought, like, as a, having sort of dreamt up this movie in North London and being like sort of an English middle-class kid, I thought, if I'm going to write an American crime film, the only way I can authenticate it is to show it to real criminals. So that's basically what I did over the course of, like, the sort of, probably the first draft took me about a year to do. And during that process, I kept interviewing these ex-cons. And I already had the story and the characters, so I would sort of like, it's kind of like a crazy sort of trippy thing to sort of run through fictional scenarios you had or characters and ask a real ex-bank robber, you know, what he thought, and if it reminded him of anything he'd done or anybody else he knew. And, you know, if you've been in prison for that amount of time, you've met so many people that there would always be something as a point of reference. I remember actually when I first met him, I met him at Intelligentsia Coffee in Pasadena, and I was a bit nervous because, you know, he's from a completely different walk of life and you don't really know how you're going to vibe with somebody. And the first thing he said when I sat down, he goes, "Hey man, love Hot Fuzz." Know it off by heart. And there is other interesting thing about talking to a lot of the ex-cons is a lot of them are like big film fans. And it's very true to say, which is the thing, that you wouldn't necessarily think this is the case if you had actually committed the crimes, that you would be in any way interested in like watching the films at all. But they all have a viewpoint on them. And I think in a lot of ways, Joe, this guy, who then later became the script consultant and also plays the security guard that Jamie Foxx shoots. I thought I'd put him on the receiving end of a bank robbery. So, you know, he said this thing is that a lot of kind of like criminals watch those movies and ape them, you know.
Was there anything specific that they had told you that really informed something that we may have seen on screen?
Oh yeah, a lot of it. A lot of the early research was the stuff about, lots of stuff. I mean, the things about getaway drivers they're not going to steal like vintage muscle cars, and they're not going to steal like sort of sports cars that are worth $250,000. They're going to steal cars that are going to A, be easy to steal, B, that are going to blend into traffic. So that's the whole idea of that opening section with the red sedans in a row. And a lot of the stuff, the detail from there, the idea of stealing cars from long-stay parking structures that won't be, like, people won't miss for like 48 hours. So I talk a lot about that kind of process. So a lot of the thing about the sort of switching and ditching stuff in terms of like having a sort of a reasonably generic car and then like getting under like a sort of a parking lot and switching and going to something else. Even little details like the idea of at the end of the first chase, Ansel and Eiza Gonzalez swap places. So when they drive out in the second car, she's driving. And that's literally just kind of like sort of simple like sleight of hand to distract the police. Right. Is like, oh, that's not them. They're in a green car and it's a woman driver. You know, sort of like just very simple things that they do to just kind of immediately just, because what getaway drivers are trying to do is just blend into traffic as much as they can. And there's another very specific thing that came out of this is the other questions that I would ask of everybody that I spoke to was, would you ever listen to music on the way to a heist? And Joe Lawyer, when I said that to him, he literally said a line that Jamie says in the movie. He goes, on the way to a heist, no. I've got enough demons up here making music. And I was like, just write that one down. And then he said this other amazing thing. He said, so he sort of said that, and he said he's too busy getting kind of hyped up and gearing himself up. And in fact, that mantra that Jamie Foxx kind of says about the idea of fooling yourself into the idea that the bank has your money specifically is like a thing that he would do to psych himself up. And then he did say, and this isn't in the movie, but he said, I'd sometimes play a song if I thought I'd gotten away, if I knew I'd gotten away. And I'd say, what would you play? And he said, Smooth Criminal by Michael Jackson. I thought if I put that in the movie, it would be too on the nose and too silly. But then another thing that's straight in the script was a different guy. He put me onto this other guy, Rick, in Boston, who was an armored car robber. Again, had gone to prison for his crimes and was out and is also writing crime fiction. And it's that funny thing, you know, when you're talking to somebody and you say, would you ever listen to music on the way to a job? And he'd go, no, never. And you know, it's always going to be a good story if somebody goes, although there was this one time, you know it's going to be a good, and he literally said the thing that's in the movie. He said that we were on our way to a job, and we had the radio on, and the radio was playing Guns N' Roses cover of Knocking on Heaven's Door, and one of our crew was saying, this song is bad luck, this song is a bad omen, this is a bad omen, we shouldn't go in, let's not go in, this is a bad omen, let's call it off, and they did.
You would talk before about this not being a London movie, but what about it was specifically Atlanta, other than filming there, which sort of informed the reason to turn it into an Atlanta movie? Had you thought of another city first? Was this like an LA movie?
I wrote it in LA because I was living in LA at the time, and it was LA was the city that I knew the best. And also kind of has a similar thing in terms of like just the the thing of banks being near freeways and the idea of robbing a bank and getting on the freeway and disappearing is a very California thing. So, you know, LA is sort of prohibitively expensive at the moment to shoot stuff like this. So Atlanta was one of those tax break places that came up. And I'll admit that initially I was reluctant because I thought, oh, everybody's shooting in Atlanta at the moment. But then I went there specifically. I said, let me go there and just kind of spend some time, because I'd only ever really been to Atlanta for press tours, and I'd been in some studios there, but I'd never really explored. So I spent about 5 days doing that. And then I really got my head around it, and it actually seemed to be not just a no-brainer, but also kind of a better location for it, because Atlanta is like, you know, sort of big music city, obviously, still a big car city. You like sort of still like muscle cars, you know, dominate Challengers and Chargers and Camaros and Mustangs everywhere, like, whereas LA has gone all Prius. I say that as somebody who drives a Prius sometimes. So that really worked. And also, even Atlanta on a crime level, I just started reading, I literally started reading, I just put in Atlanta bank robberies in Google and just went, you know, and it's like stuff that was in the script already, it actually happened, and videos of people on the I-85. So I was thinking, oh, it's all there, you know, and then also Atlanta itself as a travel hub is an interesting place because it's like the central hub for like airport,
right,
trains, freeways. It is also, because of that, then a crime hub. And then I think also it made a bit more sense once I changed it, is the idea of Baby and Deborah like heading west. It kind of makes a lot more sense in this, you know, it makes less sense in Los Angeles when you can go to San Diego. That would be that would be their dream, is to go to SeaWorld. So I think it worked better. As soon as I changed it, I knew it was the right decision, and I thought, and also there was also, up from the 70s and 80s, the spirit of Atlanta car chase movies. Of all the Burt Reynolds, White Lightning and Gator and Smokey and the Bandit. And Paul Williams, obviously, who plays the Butcher, is from Smokey and the Bandit.
Was that a difficult, did you have to convince the studio to say, like, we want this to be in Atlanta, or are they cool with whatever? Like, when you're shooting there and you're going, well, I'm going to change it from LA to Atlanta, do they, at that point, care?
They were fine with it. I don't think it was ever a problem, really. I mean, I think there's so many films out that are not where they say they are, and it always like makes me, I don't know, I never entirely
I would think it would be harder to make Atlanta look like LA, or really any other city, like to shoot around Atlanta instead of just shooting in Atlanta.
Well, it's also like a waste of money. It's just wasting like money changing signs and stuff where you can just use it as it is, you know?
Yeah. One thing I want to get into, and I assume everybody here has seen the movie, so there's some spoiler stuff here, unless, I don't know, anybody just walked in at the end, I'm sorry. But one of the things that I thought was really bold and sort of exciting about this movie is in the end, Baby has to face the music, no pun intended. Where did that decision come from? Because so often in these types of movies, it's just they make a clean getaway and they start a fresh life together. But here he gets arrested and he goes on trial and gets convicted and goes to jail, and you know, and has to spend time in prison. What, when you were thinking about the ending of this movie, why was that important to you?
It was always the ending of the movie right from the start in the first draft. And initially the studio was sort of not against it, but they said, oh, why can't they just get away? And I said, I don't think it's like morally quite right. And also, I don't think it's fair on Lily James's character.
Right.
Because I think that's what the idea with the ending is that as he's getting away, when they maybe have a chance to, or they don't have a chance to get away, they're going to get into another chase, you know. And it's the idea that, like, why should this sort of innocent person who only got roped into this like 6 hours ago be on the run for the next 25 years?
Right.
And I think the thing is that most of these films in this genre end like two different ways. You have the Bonnie and Clyde sort of ending,
Shootout,
you know, where they kind of like die. Spoiler. Sorry, I just ruined Bonnie and Clyde. Although it is a true story, so you should know. Or you have something like The Getaway, where, spoiler alert, they get away. But, you know, I love The Getaway. I love Sam Peckinpah's The Getaway with Steve Quinney and Anna McGraw. Although the ending, the very ending, I never quite buy it.
Right.
You know, I never, because you think, so when you see two people drive off and you know what kind of trouble they're in, you're thinking, well, you're just watching them drive off into this particular sunset, but then what? And even the book of The Getaway by Jim Thompson has a much bleaker ending. So sometimes with those kind of like clean getaway endings, I never buy it, and I thought it was actually a sort of more romantic sort of gesture to actually sort of like take the rap himself,
right,
and sort of like do the time. And I think just the thing of like, you know, you could keep running, but at some point he does have to face the music and take some responsibility. Because at the start of the movie, he's sort of fooling himself that he's not a criminal, but of course he already is. And at some point, he has to take responsibility for his actions. So it was always the idea. And then I got to say that the studio completely came around on it because they said it thought it was, you know, sort of had a moral responsibility to it. And I always liked the Warner Brothers gangster films from the 30s that like have those kind of like Angels with Dirty Faces and like endings like that kind of have that real moral kicker. I like those endings. So that was the idea, was to come up with a third way that wasn't slow-mo death or clean getaway.
If anybody here has any questions, we're going to do some audience Q&A. There's a mic right over to the side of the theater, up over by the exit. If you want to start lining up now, we're going to do some social media questions now. So if you guys want to wait up there, we'll get to you in just a second. We'll get to some questions from Twitter.
What a lovely theater this is, by the way.
Thank you
so much. I haven't been in the Alamo Brooklyn yet.
Thank you all.
Thank you for building it, guys.
Let's see. Kathy Poole, Deadpool Kathy, would like to know, if you could choose a character from the Cornetto trilogy to join Baby and the gang, who would you pick?
Can I well, I'd like to go slightly else. I guess he is in the Cornetto trilogy briefly as a zombie, but it's going tangential a little bit. What about Tyres from Spaced? Who technically is in Shaun of the Dead as a zombie, so he is one of the characters from the Cornetto trilogy.
Andrew wants to know, did you get a chance to try out any of the stunts yourself? Did you ever get to sit in the car while they were doing any of those maneuvers?
Yeah, I did. I didn't do any of the extra driving myself, but I did sit in the car, and you know, no matter how many times you do it, nothing can really prepare you for like taking those corners that fast, I think. And especially when you're with a stunt team and stuff, when it's like literally the first take that I was sitting when there's that shot of John Bernthal, one of the shots of John Bernthal, I was sitting in the back, going around that corner so fucking fast, I like whacked my head really hard, and like the stunt guy say, "You okay again?" I go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." Like, you don't want to. Eventually, when we did these shots, so a lot of the shots, like as you hopefully can tell, there's no green screen in those car chases. I think it's like 95% is all in camera. Yeah. And it's all done on this platform called the Biscuit, which basically means it's not on a trailer. Like old school, most driving stuff is done with a sort of trailer where the car is attached to a trailer. This is like on its own platform, like a six-wheeler platform, with a sort of literally a sidecar pod where the driver is outside the car.
Right.
And all the cameras are set up. But that means that the kind of the car itself, like that Subaru or the kind of the Avalanche, is driving at like 80 miles an hour with the actors inside. And so usually you follow in like the command van, a separate van, which is you can watch the monitors on a satellite link up. But sometimes those things would like fritz out and stuff. So I went and sat on the car as well and like strapped myself in outside the car with the camera operators, which was an amazing experience. The closest thing I'll be to Mad Max, being strapped to the front of a car. Also, trivia note, called the Biscuit because it was developed for the movie Seabiscuit to do horse shots. True story.
Let's see. Egon192 wants to know what are some Easter eggs people should look out for in the film, if there are any.
I guess you guys have all seen it. Ansel's prison jumpsuit number is the release date of The Driver. I thought that was a good one. That's a good one for IMDb trivia in the future.
That is good. And then Rob wants to know, what is your, I don't know if you get a chance to watch TV, what is your favorite thing currently on TV? Is it Twin Peaks?
Oh,
if you've got a chance.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not completely caught up, but I have been watching it. I do think it's fantastic. So yeah, Twin Peaks.
Okay. There you go, Rob. You answered your own question. All right. Audience Q&A. First up.
Hey.
Hey.
Hey, Edgar. I was wondering, how many movies a year do you typically watch? And one of your consistent collaborators for the last couple movies has been Bill Pope. And I was wondering if you could talk about your work process with him, and at what point do you bring him in, and how does he help you get what's in your head on the screen?
First part of the question, no idea. A lot. Second part, Bill Pope. I mean, yeah, this is the third movie we've ever done with him, and he's amazing. So Bill Pope is the cinematographer. I'll list off his other credits because they're insane. It's like literally first movie, Darkman. He did Darkman, Army of Darkness, Clueless, the Matrix trilogy, Team America: World Police, Spider-Man 2 and 3. So I'm missing something else as well, a major one. But he's great, and you know he's also sort of just an amazing operator as well. But you know, unusually sometimes for cinematographers, he really like thinks about the rest of the story. He's not just thinking about the look; he's thinking about the emotion of it. So that's why I like having him around, is that I can talk to him. You know, I talk to him on like sort of an emotional and story level first before we get into the visuals. So I adore working with him. He's amazing.
Is he your guy for the future? Is he sort of your...
I hope so.
Sort of...
I hope I haven't like tired him out.
All right, who's next?
Hello. Thank you for the movie, for starters. I'm wondering, I and my friend a ways back in the line here are composers by training. And it's really, really cool for me, at least, to see something in another medium like this where, you know, you'll have a scene where the structure of it and the pacing of it is so closely tied to the music. So, you know, basically comes out of the music. And you said yourself that, you know, the whole idea for this movie came out of your musical experience. I'm wondering, though, like, in your other work, I always get a sense of there's this sort of kinetic, rhythmic energy to the way it's paced. I guess Scott Pilgrim would be another good example of that. But I'm wondering, like, how consciously that's an element of your sort of visual language, is the sort of structure and pacing and rhythm of music.
I think I think it's a big part of it. It's just kind of like sort of, I mean, it's also just things having sort of an internal rhythm in a way. I mean, it is interesting, like, just writing scenes with this, like, outside of the action scenes, like writing scenes like for this with the music playing, is I just kind of put the sort of song on a loop until I'd finished the scene. And I think it starts to inform that, or even as the actors are performing it and they've got it in their ear and stuff, like, you know, the way Ansel sort of plays that first diner scene is he's listening to that Beach Boys track in his ear the whole time. And it just makes the whole thing seem a bit dreamy, you know? So I think it's always been a big part of it. And sometimes it's just like about, I don't know. I mean, I sort of try with the dialogue a lot of times, have lots of like rhyming dialogue, so it's all got its own internal rhythm. So it's definitely a huge part of it, you know, the momentum of the music and the rhythm of it.
Cool, thank you.
Are you a big believer in the sort of dialogue? It has a sort of beat to it, the way like Mamet writes, where it's got a very specific sort of structure to it, or do you like your actors to improvise, or do you want to keep it to a very specific cadence in the dialogue, keeping it snappy? Or
it's pretty specific. I mean, it's sort of like, it's also the thing with improv as well, is the sort of like, is that usually the sort of the way the scenes are written, and this goes with everything I've done, is that a line answers, you know, the next line answers the line before. So like once you have like dialogue that where every single line is like an answer to the previous line, there's not really any room for improv. Like, so I think the only people who kind of occasionally improv, like Jamie Foxx gets in a couple of zingers that are just fantastic, but he would always do them in addition to like the line. And there's like little bits like he totally improv that thing about that some Oscar shit right there, which I said, you're an Oscar winner. I said, we have to use that line. And it was funny, an Oscar winner telling somebody else that was some Oscar shit. It was funny. So, so Jamie Foxx, I think, gets in about like 6 or 7 zingers that are great. But most of the time, it's just got that kind of like, especially with the way Spacey's dialogue is written. I definitely did a rewrite once I knew he was doing it, because you know that he can kind of like do all that rat-a-tat kind of like rat-packy sort of dialogue, like, you know, with his eyes closed. So, you know, I definitely rewrote for a little bit for him. And then also there's a rhythm to it as well, because everybody's got those names. It just to me is endlessly funny having names like Baby and Darling and Buddy, because then just normal lines sound kind of, they're talking to each other and say like, so what do you think, darling? You know, it's just, so they all sound like song titles after a while, you know?
Let's see if we can get 2 more quick ones in. Yes.
Hi, I'm Valerie. It's nice to meet you. First, I just want to thank you for sharing your art with us. It's incredible. We're not worthy. And
you are worthy, come on.
Oh, thank you. the thing that stood out to me the most the first time I saw this was the use of Baby's tinnitus, and that every time he loses his music and we hear the ringing and it builds and it builds and it gives me such a sense of dread and it adds to the scene so incredibly well. Was that always part of the plan? Did that come later as you researched tinnitus maybe? Or I just think it's wonderful, so I just wanted to know.
It's funny, it's weird actually, because I'd already had the idea for the movie and also the idea that he was listening to it the whole time. And what's funny is I had sort of suppressed like a bad memory myself, because I had tinnitus when I was like 7 or 8. Like for, you know, and I'm not quite sure what it was. It was like a build-up of like sort of wax or something. It was a really really painful. I used to have to get my ears syringed, and that kind of went on for like sort of 2 years. And I sort of completely suppressed that until when I was researching this movie, I read the Oliver Sacks book, Musicophilia. I don't know if anybody's ever read that book. And there's obviously a lot of stuff about like how music affects the brain and people's different relationships to music. And I read a lot of stuff that made a lot of sense for this, and that was one of them. So when I read that, I thought, oh, that's exactly what it should be, and that's why he listens to music the whole time. And then in doing research about tinnitus, you know, I read things like, it was like, oh, Barbra Streisand is a famous sufferer of tinnitus. What's funny about that, this is another Jamie Foxx thing, is that Jamie Foxx has to say that line where he says, do I look like I know a fucking thing about Barbra fucking Streisand? Jamie Foxx is friends with Barbra Streisand. So on the set, I said to Jamie after doing those takes, I said, do you think Barbara would be okay with that line? And Jamie Foxx said, he goes, do you know Barbara? And I was like, no. And he goes, Barbara's gangster. A direct quote from Jamie Foxx. Barbara's gangster.
Oh, man, thank you so much. Last question, real quick.
Hi, I just had a quick question about the choreography of the car chases, I guess. How much of it was in the script of, you know, Baby does a zigzag through an alley, and how much of it was speaking to your stunt people and saying, how do we get from point A to point B?
It's sort of a bit of everything. It was an amazing experience as a real collaboration, because I had literally it all starts to, I mean, the greatest thing about doing a thing like this is where all departments start working together and you come up with something entirely fresh that none of you independently could have done. So literally the way it worked out is like I had written the car chase into the script, which is a very weird thing to write a car chase generally, because you're trying to get across on the page what, you know, I could see and hear in my head, and trying to get it, make it something on the page is tough. Then I did storyboards, then I edited the storyboards to the music. And then you start to bring in the, you know, the stunt guys and also the choreographer as well. The other person who's kind of key in this is Ryan Hefferton, who is the choreographer. So then it becomes a collaboration with those guys. And then Darren Prescott, who was the sort of stunt coordinator and second unit director, he had a sort of a task that he'd never had before, where we had to think about stunts and their timing within the song, because Bell Bottoms itself is not going to get any longer. So it's actually quite an interesting exercise where it's like we'd have to like map it out. Is like this part of the song he's going down here and down here and down here. Then when they hit these other cars, that's this point in the song. And he goes down this way, down this way, down this way. And then when he's in the alley and he does that stunt, is this part of the song. So you had these kind of anchor points, so you kind of had to work it out, and sometimes work out how much driving you had on this block before you had to turn for the next bit. So it was, I mean, it was that thing where it was like both like a complete headfuck, but also sort of in such pursuit of such a kind of like a plan to timing. It was almost like having to plan the heist itself. So it was really interesting, you know, experience. And then I got to like sort of like, then some of the sort of stunts would, what I drew for the alley stunt was something sort of similar, but not what they did. And then they came up with the idea of the 180 in, 180 out, which is a stunt that Jeremy Fry, the main stunt driver, performs, which is just insane. So it was that thing where we just kind of basically had to sort of block out these kind of like chases and think about all of those sections. There is, I'll tell you one thing is a sort of a good example actually of the timing of it. It's probably a good thing to end on, but the second chase is all set to the Damned, neat, neat, neat. And I'd done all the boards, I'd cut all the boards to the music, and then Bill Pope watched the animatic and he says, "You're going to run out of song." And I said, "Why do you say that?" He says, "Because you're not leaving enough time for the stunts. The stunts, the actual physics of the car is going to be slower than the way you've edited it." And I was like, I think it'll be okay. Of course he was right. So we were editing this scene and I was thinking, I've got way too much action for this song. That song's only like 2.5 minutes long. So I didn't really know what to do. I didn't really want to start another song. That doesn't really make sense. And it goes against the idea of you want to sort of have a song per scene. So then in that sequence, they go down the embankment and then they have to ditch their car and get into a new one. So we'd shot all of that stuff when he carjacks it from the young mother with the baby. And so I knew that I'd run out of song. So literally 4 weeks after we shot the rest of that, I then did a shot of Ansel in the car rewinding the song. So he rewinds it to like the final like verse and chorus, and then starts playing it again. Because I thought, well, that's exactly what the character would do. He's literally been knocked off track twice. He's had to start the intro once already because they start squabbling about Mike Myers. Then like a member of the public rams them. Then they get rammed off the road again, and so they're not even on their route they were supposed to be on. So that thing was shot later as a way of Baby literally getting back on track.
Well, thank you so much on behalf of everybody here, everybody in Alamo Draft Houses across the United States. Thank you so much for coming. What a wonderful movie.
Thank you all Alamos across the country as well.
Yeah.
I love you all.
Everybody. Thank you again. Everybody here in Brooklyn, if you guys can sit tight, you guys each got your Baby Driver glasses. Put those on, stand up. We're going to take a really quick picture with Edgar before you guys go.
And tell your friends to go see it starting Wednesday. I appreciate it.
And if you want to see something really fun, come and see Kid Koala perform a live DJ set on Tuesday before the film. Oh, shit. We need a table up here. Here, right on Tuesday. Yeah, on Tuesday, right where we're standing. There's 2 shows, 7 and 10 or 10:30.
Does he do it before or after the movie?
Before.
Oh, yeah. I'm not going to see that. We'll figure that out. What are we doing?
Okay.
Do you have glasses? Do you want
No,
to
I do not.
Okay.
Never been worn.
Where do you want me?
What's the best way?
Turn the lights up, though, right?
Yeah, turn the lights up, right?
Mike, you should turn the lights up.